Hey, it's me, Shane, Gemini Garage, and I guess this is going to be part two here where I kind of discuss the legality, morality, and whatever else might go along with buying one of these guitars here. I guess I should start by first saying that my whole life I've always been very patriotic. Not so much political. I've always looked at that like it was just nothing but a show. But I've always been very patriotic, and I've always, tried to, take care of your family, take care of your house, your car, your dog, even your lawnmower, if you can. But it's important to try and invest in things like that, and I've always felt that way, about, a person's country as well. When I was a teenager, I started noticing a really bad attitude about, some people having a really bad attitude about this country, and that's not to say, you can have all kinds of feelings and opinions about the politics of it and everything else, but when it comes to, the place that you live, you should, if you don't like it or you're not happy with it, that's one thing, but you should, not try to be making it worse. So having said that, I don't really see a huge problem with people buying these things at this time. And the reason is back in the late 80s, kind of, in the 70s and the 80s, it was kind of like Japan. They were sort of wheeling and dealing with them, and a lot of people weren't happy with it. And then in the mid to later 90s, it was China. And in those days, I was kind of like, aren't these countries, still, the C word, not exactly free? And people would kind of say, well, that's the way they rule things, but they're not like they used to be, and they're not, they're a freer society, and it's, not such a big deal to wheel and deal with them, and everybody just kind of explained it away. But the truth of the matter is that's not really the case. And when it comes to these guitars, we've got so much bigger fish to fry than worrying about these things here. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, well, every little bit helps. Yes, it does. But these are so far down on the food chain, and the other problem too is you can't, Gibson's not completely, and I'm not bagging on Gibson, but they're not completely innocent in this either, because they do have Epiphone brand that's made in China. So you can't, I'm not saying that Gibson deserves to be cloned or backdoored, but if you're going to put a factory and allow your stuff to be built in a country that's of that kind of thinking, then you shouldn't be surprised if your stuff starts getting cloned and your stuff starts getting ripped off, and you know what I'm saying? So, like I said, well, I'm not saying they, should have that happen. You can't really be surprised by it. And the other thing is too, this is just like a 75-year-old design here, so I mean, how long are your copyrights, trademarks? I mean, I know that stuff can be renewed. Copyrights are like, patents are like 20 years, and a copyright can be like lifetime, and then trademarks like 10 years, but you have to renew it, I think, or something. But the point is, Gibson has more than made their money off of this design. They themselves decided to use China as, a source to build their own guitars. And so fast forward all these years later, I don't think people should really be freaking out about, these things, and shouldn't be shaming people for buying them when everything else comes from China anyways. I also think that in some ways these are probably really not bad for Gibson. And when I say that, they kind of remind me of a sampler, like when you were a kid and you'd go to the mall and you'd walk by the Hickory Farms, and there'd be the lady out there with the, a sausage or some cheese or a cracker or something on a stick, and they'd, be like, would you like to try some of this? And to me, that's almost what these are like. It's almost like a Chibson, 59 clone, and then you try one, and then you decide you want an Epiphone or maybe a Gibson. And you might be saying, well, that's probably not, that probably does happen a lot, because nobody that's looking at these things was probably ever really considering a Gibson. I mean, you have to understand that. The people that are going to be looking at Gibsons or even Epiphones, they're out of this price range. So, all these are probably really going to do is just either cause people to buy a lot of them and then buy a bunch of parts from Gibson to make them better, or they will try one of these things and then decide, hey, just for the heck of it, I'd like to get an Epiphone or a Gibson. And I know you could argue all day long whether or not that's actually happening or not, but I think it probably is, and I don't think Gibson is probably hurting any. You know, like I said, this design is 75 years old, so pretty much everything they sell with this is pretty much gravy at this point. So the other thing is they are not exactly smuggling these things in. And on that note, while they generally are not smuggling them in, there was a shipping container in a port in California in November of 2024. I'll try and post some pictures of it. If anybody out there wants to investigate this story a little bit further and comment, please do, because it's kind of an interesting story. But they got this shipping container, and it had 3,000 Chibsons in it, basically. Well, the headline was $18 million worth of counterfeit music, you know, instruments. Little further down, it was, you know, 3,000, you know, fake copy Gibson guitars. Then it goes to say that they, you know, if they would have sold at retail value, they would have been worth 18 million. Well, 3,000 Chibsons at about 250, which is all you're going to get for them. You know, that's like $750,000, not 18 million. So they kind of fluffed that part of the article up, and then they made some comments about, well, thank goodness all these clones didn't hit the music stores, because they would have been. These were obvious Chibsons. They had the slotted screws in the bridges, and they had, you know, they didn't come in a Gibson box, I'm guessing, either. They would have come in whatever crap styrofoam taped up box that they come in. So no guitar stores would have been fooled into selling them. So the whole thing just, I hate to say it, and maybe I'm wrong, but it was almost like one of those press conferences when they, you know, make a big drug bust, and they got you know, you got the table there, and the drugs and the money and the guns, and we're all safer now, and then they just kind of forget about it. It was kind of one of those things. So again, it was on November 24th in a port in California. Shipping container, 3,000 guitars seized. So look that up, it was kind of interesting. On a similar note, back in the 1970s, hold on just a second here. Back in the 1970s, they did have some issues with some other countries, Japan. This guitar right here is called, I always want to say Takemine, but it's Takima, or Taka. I can't even say it now. Takamine. There it is, Takamine. It just completely, I couldn't say it. This particular guitar here was, this is about a 74 or 75 year. And these guitars here were part of what they call lawsuit era guitars. You can look that up online, lawsuit era guitars, where some American manufacturers were, you know, going to sue some of these other companies because they were, you know, getting a little bit too close to their design. So I'm thinking honestly, like, there's probably something going on, because you can just buy these guitars, you know, wherever now. Even when they made that shipping container bust, you could still buy these guitars wherever. I don't know if they just, you know, these all come, mine all came with a sticker on the headstock over the you know, the Gibson text. So I don't know if that's something that once they put that on there, I don't know if that had something to do with that shipping container bust. Sometimes I'm almost thinking it's like maybe they thought there was something else in that shipping container, and then they opened it up, it was in a bunch of Chibson guitars, and they're like, oh, what do we do with these? Which, by the way, that was 3,000 Chibson guitars. I wonder what they did do with all of those. You're like, they're probably hanging on your wall. Yeah, probably. Anyway, as I said before, you know, buy American when you can, support your country when you can, but this stuff is just so far down the food chain, I just really don't see any sense in shaming people for buying them, especially when Gibson's got a company over there and everything else we buy and own is from over there. You know, I'm filming this on something from over there, you're watching it on something from over there, and while I don't particularly like that and would like to, you know, bring a lot of that work, you know, back into this country, like I said, it's been going down that road for a long time. It is what it is, and it's just kind of ridiculous to shame people for buying something from some place that the place that you're trying to protect has factory over there too, meaning Epiphone. So that's just kind of my opinion on the whole thing. I will also try to comment on a Fender just won a lawsuit a couple days ago too over in Europe someplace, saying that nobody can sell anything that looks, you know, like a Fender body style. And so they're kind of trying to figure out what that's going to mean for the people over there in Europe. And at this point in time with these guitar manufacturers, I think it's just greed. You know, everybody that designed these things has made most of their money off it or not even here anymore. So, but anyways. All right, on to a quick little sound test, and then we're going to tear these things down.